right, you're watching On the Story. We are coming out of this press conference out of Colorado, and we are hearing charges of Patrick Frazee, first-degree murder and solicitation to commit murder. I want to bring in a panel now. I've got Mike Galanos with us, who's been covering the story the whole time, along with criminal defense investigator Charles Mittelstadt and former prosecutor Bob Bianchi. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
So we've all been here watching this presser unfold. We've been following this story. Let's start with you, Charles. One thing that initially, as this news conference was underway, that jumps out to you, obviously the charges kind of break down solicitation to commit murder. And right there at the end, when they were saying, you know, they didn't necessarily have to have something completed to be able to have this formal charge.
Correct. So I think the significant thing, Shyann, is that you heard the district attorney making the point that you don't necessarily have to complete that step, right? It's just the fact that you have solicited, attempted to solicit somebody. And so given the fact that they don't have a body at this point, they have not located her, that would be consistent with that. The other thing, too, that we heard is there was evidence of a crime at her apartment. And so those two things in combination, I think, is what leads us to where we are right now.
And Bob is with us, too. You know, the solicitation of first-degree murder, you hear some of the reporters asking there some of the questions, will there be multiple arrests? And he kind of ducks the question a bit there. So it sounds like maybe that could be potentially, kind of break that down for us, that charge.
Okay, well, first of all, the FBI blinked when the agent said, the special agent in charge, that those that are involved in this, which is obviously more than one person. Solicitation would indicate and another person was either requested to assist in the murder or in fact assisted in the murder. That tells me as a homicide prosecutor that they must have had somebody speaking to them that gave them this data. Otherwise, I don't think they would have made the arrest prior to finding the body here. So all indications are that they are very confident that she in fact has been murdered. I believe that they have a cooperating witness. And Shyann, my last point is, let's not forget here that the anecdotal data is that they had broken up on Thanksgiving, which certainly provides a motive, and that there were trucks that were moving things to waste facilities, and that there were two other individuals that were in cars that were actually unloading those trucks at the waste facility, and the defendant was stayed inside of the truck. So all that goes to that solicitation that somebody else assisted or may have assisted him after the fact. So it sounds like they got a pretty solid case.
And this whole time, you know, I feel like a lot of people watching from home would see this case. Obviously not investigators at all, but, you know, he wouldn't talk to media. He wouldn't talk one-on-one with investigators, and he always wanted to have his attorney present. There's a lot of things that jump out to people here. Mike Galanos, obviously you've been covering stories like this for years, decades. What really jumps out to you when you hear this story and recently the updates in the news conference?
Well, I think we've been covering it, you know, for so long now. I mean, she's been missing since Thanksgiving Day, and when you hear that they have not found her, but they do not believe she's alive, that hits you. But there's been red flags since the beginning here. When you talk, there's no way a brand new mom is not going to be with her daughter on Thanksgiving Day. And now you're hearing that at her residence, it could have happened on Thanksgiving Day. You know, we don't know those particulars as of yet. Now the headline here, this solicitation charge, and I'll ask you, Charles, does that mean you're asking someone to help out? Is this someone to help out with evidence? Is this someone to help out? Maybe you send them with the phone somewhere where you get this cell phone ping of hers in Idaho? Is that all part of that charge, just helping out in the crime?
Well, this is specific to the solicitation to commit the murder. Okay. So I think that it's probably not.
Okay.
But what listen, it could be anybody. It could be a relative, and maybe they have, as Bob has suggested, maybe they have a cooperating witness. Maybe they have some sort of digital documentary evidence in terms of an email that was sent, in terms of a text message that was sent, that was exchanged with somebody that he attempted to solicit or was successful in soliciting. And so you know, we're reading tea leaves at this point, but there are a number of different possibilities. But clearly there's somebody else involved, and whether they're actively cooperating or whether there's some sort of documentary evidence that exists, it's likely one or the other.
You know, for the beginning, I felt like there was a couple of red flags obviously that we're covering, but you know, you see the investigators come forward and say he is not a suspect. They said that in less than a couple days after they announced this case. Was that something maybe to throw him off, knowing the whole time maybe they were looking at him as a prime suspect?
Well, they may have legitimately not labeled him one because they simply didn't have enough information at that time. I mean, this is obviously a very well-resourced investigation. You have the Woodland Park Police Department, you have the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, and you have the FBI. So, and we heard from the presser that there were upwards of 30 FBI agents involved in this investigation. So, very, very well-resourced investigation, and it seems like they ultimately were able to gather the evidence they were looking for.
And they've spent a lot of time, obviously, searching his 35-acre property, and it turns out, it looks like now that they're obviously putting a lot of time and effort into her house. Agents still there, even combing the scene. Is that something that they might look for more evidence, even though they have enough to place these charges?
What we heard was that that is a critical crime scene in their view, that they found something there that would lead them to believe that there is evidence of a crime, that something occurred at her apartment. I think it's one of the key components to these charges.
All right. And before we take off, Bob Bianchi, talk to us, too, a little bit about some of the body language we saw during that press conference. Like you said, it were like subtle hints that kind of alluded to, you know, there's more to the story.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to see the body language, but you could definitely tell from the conversations that were going on that there's a lot more that's going to come out in the case. And let's not forget, to get back to your previous question, and my good friend Charles was talking about, when they did the press conference, he was not there. And I found it very odd that they had stated that he gave a DNA sample. So why he was a person of interest, because they probably didn't have enough probable cause at that point in time, he clearly was a person that they were looking at from the very beginning, because it would be atypical to take a DNA sample from somebody unless you have strong suspicions as a prosecutor that the individual could be involved. And, you know, it's funny. As a defendant, you want to cooperate. You're the fiancé, right? This happens in all these domestic violence murder investigations I've done for over 30 years as a prosecutor. They have to cooperate because they got to go along with the idea that, hey, I'm trying to find my fiancé. And that's usually what brings them down, because they do things like give DNA samples, give statements that ultimately lead to charges against them. It's really a sad case, and it's unfortunately not an uncommon one when you're dealing with domestic violence and homicide, which is usually the #1 reason people are killed.
We are out of time, but I do want to point out the child is in protective custody and will be reunited with Melissa Berreth's family probably later this afternoon. We'll keep you updated on this one. Much more to come on this story.